Hello, BookTube. I have a couple of pieces of mail here for you saved from the general opening that happens. Most of the stuff that I've opened has not been all that interesting, certainly not like a big Christmas box like yesterday. But we have a couple of packages here that may be of interest. It's my own fault for slacking off on mail, and it's not a question of the mail, it's a question of me, because I am caring less and less about new releases as the year comes to its end. I'm not reading anything for 2025 in the remainder of 2024. I'm not planning on any kinds of review coverage or anything like that for 2025. So getting new releases in the mail, it doesn't have quite the immediate involvement that it did throughout the rest of the year. I know that's a little bit that's a little bit blasphemous. A lot of readers out there would like to get free books in the mail, but nevertheless, this is the time of year when I am the least interested in new releases. But we'll see. I'm assuming that there are two packages here. I'm assuming that both of them are 2025 releases. We'll see if either one of them has any interest. Okay. All right. This is... Oh, wow. All right. This is for April 1st. A romance. A trade paper romance. This is A Duke Never Tells by Susan Enoch, who I really like. I don't know about this kind of a cover. Kind of weird cartoony lettering. At least this is not just a blank-faced, Fiverr art project. At least there's a person on the cover. I still pine for anything like a traditional Regency cover, but at least this is better than that. So let's see here. When the witty and bright Lady Meg Pinwell learns of her upcoming betrothal to James Clay, the perennial playboy and newly minted Duke of Ernhurst, she fears an impending marriage of bad compatibility and even worse behavior. To discover whether his true nature is as salacious as the society pages say, Meg and her Aunt Clara journey to the Duke's estate in disguise, with Meg in servant's clothes to better gossip with his staff. It would never happen. Never. The downstairs staff of any establishment would know right away. And not through gossip, through the way you behave. They would know immediately. However, James has his own frustrations with his late father's marriage plans, and upon the lady's arrival, promptly shirks the dukedom onto the stalwart butler, introducing himself as a new trainee. Oh my God. Okay. All right, that's wonderful. So they're both in disguise. With James parading as the world's worst butler and Meg as a too curious servant, everyone is soon falling in love with the absolute wrong person. All right, I'm sold. They say the course of true love never does run smooth. At Ernhurst, it's running amok. Okay. All right, I'm sold. Okay. All right, so that comes out in April. That is just delightful. That kind of a plot is just delightful. Of course, you can be as delightful as the day is long. It can still be bad, but Susan Enoch has never let me down. I don't have any other books of hers that look like this, and none in trade. But I think maybe it's because I should ask Sarah at the Bookish Knitter. But I get the impression that romances are moving away from mass market paperbacks. That they're rebranding and remarketing themselves to just be trade paperbacks, and that if romances stop publishing in mass market paperback, then we can practically say goodbye to the format. I don't know, but that comes out in April. That comes out on April Fool's Day, and then we have this next package, and then we'll be done. Just these two. What is this next one? Oh my. Okay. All right. I think this comes out in April as well. No, May. This comes out in mid-May. We talked about this already. This is Ron Chernow's forthcoming biography of Mark Twain. This is going to be one of the best-selling nonfiction works of the year. It's going to be reviewed in every review journal in the world. Let's see here. Hailed as the father of American literature, Mark Twain has long been venerated as an emblem of Americana. Posterity has left us a sanitized view of a humorous man in a white suit, dispensing witticisms with a twinkling eye. Okay. In fairness, though, Twain also did that. Very consciously manipulated his image, just as much as Tom Wolfe did. Now, in his highly anticipated book, Ron Chernow provides a more fully nuanced view of the revered writer. Chernow, the highly lauded biography of Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and Ulysses S. Grant, masterfully crafts a vivid, intimate portrait of America's first and most influential literary celebrity. I love Mark Twain. I'm not happy about the photoshopping of him into a brown suit on this cover, but I love Mark Twain. Love him. Read everything, read it all multiple times. I really, really like this figure, literarily and biographically. But he was not America's first literary sensation. Not at all. You're not doing him any service to say that. He would be the first person to say that wasn't true. So you're not doing him any service to say so. Off the top of your head, I'm sure that you can name 2 or even 3 literary celebrities who existed before Mark Twain. Washington Irving, Benjamin Franklin, and Nathaniel Hawthorne all come to mind. But there are others. James Fenimore Cooper. Anyway, I get the point, and it's just the pub sheet. It's not the book. Born Samuel Langhorne Clemens in 1835, Twain was an early teller of tall tales. At a young age, he left his home in Missouri, moving to Mississippi, where he piloted steamboats, to the Nevada Territory during the silver mine boom, where he engaged in vigorous discourse and debate at the local newspaper, to San Francisco, where he began publishing popular, brash stories under a pen name soon to be immortalized. Twain eventually settled in Hartford, where he wrote some of his most well-known works. He threw himself into American politics, emerging as the nation's most notable pundit. There were 3 pundits at the time, all from Boston, who were more notable for politics, for being political pundits. While his talents as a writer and speaker flourished, his madcap business ventures eventually forced him into bankruptcy. One of the things I love about Mark Twain, one of the many, many things that I love about Mark Twain is that he couldn't hold 2 nickels together. Needless to say, I sympathize with that. I honestly think sometimes, I know that I'm wrong, but I honestly think sometimes that it's just a natural gift, like right-handedness, as to whether or not you can do that. To economize, Twain and his family spent 9 eventful years in exile in Europe. He suffered the death of his wife and 2 daughters, and the last stage of his life was marked by heartache, political crusades, and the eccentric behavior that obscured darker forces at play. Drawing on Twain's bountiful... Darker forces at play? What does that mean? Drawing on Twain's bountiful archives, including thousands of letters and hundreds of unpublished manuscripts, Chernow shows how as Twain matured, he evolved into a gadfly and reformer, acting as the conscience of American society. No other white author of his generation grappled so fully with the legacy of slavery after the Civil War or showed such keen interest in African American culture. It's just the pub sheet. I guess that's the closest that we're going to come to an oblique reference. Okay, all right. Many of the socio-political issues Twain wrote about, including racism, class inequality, and access to education, reverberate today. Yeah, he wrote about those on every 10th Saturday. You might want to mention Frederick Douglass. You might want to mention him by name, since you're coming so close over and over again. In this book, the author has written a brilliant work of scholarship that shines a light on a full, fascinating, and complex life and career of one of the most original characters in American history. Yes, and that, more than anything, there are 2 factors that are going to make this thing sell like hotcakes. One is Ron Chernow, believe it or not, in the world of biographies, which is fairly rarefied reading. Even the tiny number of people in the world who like to read usually draw the line at long works of history or biography. But also, unlike his previous subject, Ulysses S. Grant, most Americans, if you ask them, they would not know that name. Most Americans are MAGA fascists, so they don't know anything about history at all. All they know is the leader. So they don't know about Ulysses S. Grant. They have no idea that the General Grant they may have heard of at the Battle of Shiloh or whatever ever became president. They don't have any idea what he did as president. And yet that book was huge, and it did well. And that difficulty disappears completely when you're talking about Mark Twain, or, for instance, the subject before that, Washington. Mark Twain is, among many other things, a complete name recognition icon. Not in this photo, in a Photoshop cover that makes sure to show him in a brown suit, but in his name and Huck Finn. Every American school child is introduced to this figure, whether they want to be or not, and because the American pedagogical system, they don't want to be, before they can get to high school. So before they can escape it, they're introduced to this figure. Every American feels like they know Mark Twain. There's no real popular vector of that at the moment. For a long time, Hal Holbrook had a one-man show of Mark Twain that was great, just great. And it imprinted itself on a generation of readers. But the popularity that Mark Twain, the little boost that he got from that one-man show, spawned a couple of biographies of its own. There isn't any equivalent here. As far as I know, Ken Burns has not done a documentary on Mark Twain. As far as I know, there's no popular novel or a miniseries or anything like that. But it doesn't matter. Mark Twain is one of the few celebrities who doesn't need that help. So this will be like I mentioned, a 1,200-page book, right? Yeah, 1,100 pages. This will be an enormous doorstop of a thing. But unlike with Grant, and maybe before the Broadway musical, unlike with Hamilton, with Twain, it's easy. The jump is easy. I'm probably not making myself clear. With Washington, Washington was a horrible book. It's a horrible biography by Ron Chernow, but it needed no introduction. Its subject needed no primer among possible readers. And although those readers might be wrong, they might not know a lot about Washington, and they certainly don't know as much as they think they do about Mark Twain. Mark Twain is the same way, where the name recognition could not be any higher. So this will be interesting. It'll be really tempting not to read this before the end of the year. I don't think anyone, including Ron Chernow, was expecting his Hamilton biography to be so popular or so well received. I am certain that no one expected its Broadway adaptation into a dumb hip-hop musical to be the most popular thing since Jesus. I'm sure that no one expected that. And then the follow-up, Washington, was terrible. As far as I know, I'm the only mainstream critic who wrote a thoroughgoing demolition of the book. Some history journals did, but all the popular press just reflexively loved it. If I can remember correctly, I will leave a link to my review down below. So when the dust had settled from the big Washington book, I was at sixes and sevens when it came to Ron Chernow. He'd written one biography. I didn't read the earlier ones. I didn't care about them one way or another. But he'd written one biography that I really liked. I really liked his Hamilton biography. And he'd written another biography that I really hated. That doesn't leave me any room for internal negotiation. I just had to wait for the next book. I just had to wait to see. That's Schrodinger's cat. I just had to wait to see what the next book would be like. And the Grant book is excellent. Even in a crowded field. H.W. Brands wrote a great book on Grant. Gene Smith wrote a great book on Grant. But even so, Ron Chernow's big doorstop Grant book is excellent. Just fantastic. So that led me to think, okay, we'll be fine. And I don't know. Is it that Ron Chernow slipped into complete hagiography with Washington and has now regained his footing, now that I presume he's independently wealthy? Or is this like some sort of oscillation? Is this going to be some sort of oscillation? Are we going to go back to a bad biography? I didn't think so, but what was that mention? Eccentric behavior that obscured darker forces at play. That gives me a little wary. So we will see. We won't see for a while, but what a combination. So we have a Regency romance and a gigantic biography. That is the mail for today. Uh, I don't know. I'm a huge fan of Mark Twain. I'm a huge fan of Twain biographies. I usually love what they try to do. And two of those biographies have been genuinely brilliant. So we will see. Fascinating. I'm sure that every critic everywhere will know about this book, and every editor of every literary journal is going to assign this to somebody. Everyone is. No exceptions. With Ron Chernow, it could be, Alex the cab driver. He would still be assigned everywhere. But it's Mark Twain. That's pretty big. That's as big a marquee name as you get in American literary history. So this is going to be assigned everywhere. But it's not just book section editors. Every editor, everywhere. Vanity Fair, Entertainment Weekly, USA Today. They're all going to talk about this book. Because they don't feel like they need to explain anything. Even if it's Ron Chernow coming off the success of Hamilton on the Broadway show, if you've got one little paragraph in Us magazine or whatever, and you're the editor who does arts and entertainment, so every once in a blue moon you have to talk about a book, you're not going to know what to do with Ulysses S. Grant. Famous Civil War general, I guess, is what you could do. But you're going to know that most of your readers aren't going to have any idea who Ulysses S. Grant is. Whereas Mark Twain, everybody thinks they know that. This is going to get reviewed everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And my worry, naturally, is that the reviews aren't going to read the book. That they aren't going to assess it as a work, which Ron Chernow might like that. Some writers get to the point where they want to just be treated like, the dolphin. But he shouldn't be. He shouldn't want that. He should want this to be viewed as a serious biography, in a serious way, in a critical way. In other words, I don't know if he wants that or not. I don't get a good read on Ron Chernow, but I worry that the critics are going to preempt that by just praising this thing, not reading it, just praising it. I'm sure that the New York Times will give it a review in the daily paper and then the front page of the Sunday New York Times when the time comes. The Post, the Journal, everybody. Even Big Canoe News. We'll see. It's a tempting thing, but I'm not going to get to either one of these before the end of the year. So that's the mail. I'll wrap this up for now. Sorry to go on at such length, but this is going to be a phenomenon of a book, and there aren't going to be more than 5 or 6 phenomenons in 2025 in the literary world. Genuine phenomenons, not just a mindless thing. A genuine phenomenon where everybody's talking about it. That's not going to happen often. That never happens often in any literary year, so of course it's on my mind, just as a phenomenon on its own, regardless of what critics say about it. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.